Good morning,
Hi, good
Honorable
morning.
Minister. It's a pleasure to have us have this conversation today in the middle of New Delhi, not in our continent, but there's plenty to talk about in terms of our continent.
Absolutely. Good to see you.
Thank you. So my name is Sarah Mosoetsa from South Africa. I am the head of delegation for the South African BRICS think tank, and I am also the CEO of the Human Sciences Research Council.
Okay.
So I was asked to have this conversation with you, and there's plenty that we can talk about, and I'm glad we're having this conversation. But maybe let's start with what's happening in our beautiful continent. South Africa resumed its G20 presidency in December last year. And part of what I want us to talk about is G20. Maybe let me ask the first question. How's Ghana today?
Well, Ghana is doing well. We've just transitioned after the December 2024 elections. We have a new government. I'm just 2 months in office as Foreign Minister of Ghana, and this is my first Raisina. So exciting times. So we're going through economic recovery. The President Mahama is bullish about creating jobs. We took over with unemployment very high at 14.7%. So he's talking about a 24-hour economy, industrializing, cutting waste, eliminating corruption, and giving hope, because we came to power on the back of massive youth support. I mean, a victory margin which has never been seen in our country's history, over 1.7 million people. If you look at the gap of votes that we secured, and winning 13 out of the 16 regions in our country. So massive mandate, and expectations are high, and we have to deliver. We are determined not to disappoint the young people of our country, and to make sure that we restore belief and hope in democracy, because you can see that particularly in our sub-region, we are seeing the return of coups. Military juntas are taking over, and their coups are being well received, very popular. Young people feel that the democratic dividend is not really, impacting in their lives. And so we want to make sure that we change that narrative. We restore hope on the continent and let the young people believe that, in democracy, you can find progress, you can find development, and you can find real opportunities. And so that's what we've been focusing on as a new government.
There are many people who think that in our continent, all transitions to new governments happen through coups, and that the transition from one regime to another always has upheaval. And here is Ghana saying, I think we can do it differently. G20 in the continent, yes, in South Africa, but really in the continent. What do you think we should be able to leverage from maybe let's start with Ghana, South Africa, as part of AU. What should we be able to leverage from G20?
So first of all, I think that I would like to commend the Indian government, and since we are in New Delhi, it was during their chairmanship that they made a strong case for the African Union to be admitted. And I think that Prime Minister Modi and the Indian government have been really committed to South-South, cooperation, and really advancing the cause of Africa. So we're excited now to be on board, full membership from last year, and it's great that South Africa is chairing, and there's a lot that we expect from President Ramaphosa. Having said that, I think that the greatest obstacle as we speak now is the conflict in Ukraine. And I would want that our leadership of the G20 is leveraged, because really, if you look at the key actors, whether in Europe, whether in the United States of America, even within the United Nations, because of how vetoes have been used and all of that, there's a breakdown of trust. And so you can't achieve the goals of G20, the founding fathers of G20, because really this was meant to, champion industrialization, create economic wealth, and expand, trade opportunities. But if you look at the focus now, and 3 years of war in Ukraine over $380 billion spent. That is money that could solve Africa's infrastructure crisis, do away with the homelessness in all of these G20 countries, and really empower young people. But a lot of funds is being moved away from international development, from supporting healthcare, education, electricity, into Ukraine, into war. So I would love that, the African Union, South Africa leadership is looked up to as a trusted mediator. Fortunately, we have not, been entangled in this. We have been impartial, and we should be given a chance to just solve this. I don't believe in the continuous accumulation of resources, more pledges for war, for ammunitions, for bombs, for drones, for tanks, and all of that. When human lives, as we speak, if you look at the numbers, you have about 43% of Africans living below the poverty line. You have more than 600 million Africans who don't have access to electricity, something as basic as that. So look, there's work to be done, and we should not be spending all our resources on needless wars, avoidable wars that must not be allowed to continue. So I would really want to see President Ramaphosa and African Union leaders step up, because there's a vacuum now in leadership, trusted leadership that will say that, look, there is no sense in continuing this war and other wars, the wars in the Middle East and other places. Let us build rapprochement. Let us go for peace. And then when we have attained peace, we can now rechannel all of those resources. Because now you are seeing, look at what happened in the UK recently with the International Development Assistance Secretary resigning because funds are being moved from her outfit to go fund war, and you're seeing a lot of that, in other countries where, pledges that have been made for economic development, for ODAs and all of that is being, refunneled into financing war. And those of us who are strong advocates of a world without war, and remember Ghana, India, interestingly being in India, and South Africa joined us along the line. We are the founders of the non-aligned movement. Even during the Cold War era, we have always represented peace, that there's no winner in a war, and that it's better we come together. So that's where really I think that we should be focusing on as we assume the leadership of the G20.
Honorable Minister, maybe let me bring you home. Right, let me bring you home. Yeah. The continent is also plagued with its own wars. Yeah. The Sahel. We've just had a major conflict in Rwanda and DRC, and unfortunately, South Africa was caught in the middle. Yeah. Before we get to other conflicts, as you rightfully say, there's conflict in the continent, and don't you think that the AU and particularly Ghana and then South Africa has a role to play in ensuring that there is peace in the continent, that we silence the guns, as we say, and that we channel our resources, mineral resources, towards our own economic development? So what should be AU and our own stance in terms of our own be they political policies or even economic, without going outside the continent? So wanting us to talk about us.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that charity must begin at home. And when you are anti-war, you are anti-war. And everywhere there is war, we have to speak out against these wars. And really, if you look at the wars plaguing the continent, again, you see some of these same actors divide and rule, taking advantage of a divided continent and it's always about our resources. It's always about the uranium, about the gold, about the diamond, the bauxite, the timber, So it is for us to really fend off, ward off all of these external actors. And we ourselves, positioning ourselves in a way that we don't become vulnerable to all of these, unseen hands, who we have a fair idea who they are, right from slavery to colonialism and all of that. Africa has been at the receiving end of all of these, new colonial actors who, will do anything to divide our ranks, to have access to our resources. So I agree with you that it's important for us to confront head on the conflicts that are plaguing the continent. Except that, again, even if you compare our conflicts to what is happening elsewhere, and you look at the resources, you look at the attention, the focus. I mean, when was the last time anybody talked about Sudan? Anybody talked about DRC? Anybody talked about what is happening to the Sahelian countries? And you want to even trace that to the overthrow of Gaddafi, without a post-Gaddafi plan, by some of these same actors. And now terrorism, violent extremism, is totally running amok and it's taking over Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, moving south. And that's why last week, President Mahama led a delegation, I was a member of that, to these AES countries seeking to, build new bridges and to get them to, realign and to focus on spending on counterterrorism and making sure that we defeat the terrorists. So yes, there's work that we need to do, but we all must come together and say that, look, nobody wins in a war. And even in terms of how we address these wars, you see the focus elsewhere, the resources being spent elsewhere. It's important we stop all of this spending on war and build peace and focus on our Agenda 2063, which should really deliver opportunities within the paradigm of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area for our people. And
I'm glad you're bringing us to 2063 because this is our agenda, and part of the agenda is the digital innovation inside the continent, the Africa Free Trade Agreement. Yeah. Maybe just talk to us about Ghana's own position around the digitality era for the youth especially, but also free trade. Part of what South Africa's presidency in terms of G20 has been the issue around solidarity, and there could also be solidarity around innovation. But free trade is an important part of the 2063 agenda. Maybe if you can talk to us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad that you raised the Africa Continental Free Trade Area because Ghana hosts the Secretariat, and your brother Wamkele is doing a good job as a Secretary General. Scheduled to meet him next week, and if you look at the prospects, I mean, potentially the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is a game changer. The AU report 2023 reveals that intra-African trade is just 15%. Mm-hmm. I mean, we are not trading amongst ourselves. We trade more with Europe, with Asia, than we trade amongst ourselves. And potentially, if you look at the impact that this can have on industrialization, so that thousands of young people don't have to die in the Mediterranean trying to cross, into Europe for the so-called greener pastures. So in terms of digitalization, we have only last week launched 1 Million Coders Initiative, where we are offering free training to our youth to expose them to coding. And you see, digitalization will help us leapfrog, so that even all of this value addition we are talking about, we are still exporting our cocoa, our gold and bauxite and all of that in its raw state. Digitalization can help us, to add value, which will then create more jobs for our people. So a continent of about 1.4 billion people, GDP of about 3.4 trillion dollars, which can be tripled. If we digitalize and if we give young people the opportunity, I think that the Africa Continental Free Trade Area should be invested in. We should see more African countries trading amongst ourselves, and we should be bold to determine our prices. And that's why recently Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire have formed the Cocoa Alliance. Together we contribute more than 80% of cocoa, which is used for chocolates. If you see how much Switzerland, Belgium makes, and how much we make, because we are just exporting the raw cocoa, we are not adding value. It just should tell you our story, that if we are to use new technologies to leapfrog, to add value, I mean, potentially we can really unleash wealth on the continent. And I think that the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is an initiative which we should all support and not pay lip service to it, but really, commit to it. And there are practical things we can do. Just infrastructure. We've talked about the road corridors. If we can open, so that, because it's still easy to travel out of the continent than to travel within the continent. I mean, the last time we were traveling from Ghana, to Namibia, it was such a struggle. It took us the whole day, but really, we could have done that if there was a direct flight. We could have done that in less than 2 hours, So we need to build these, roads, these infrastructure corridors, rail as well, and then we need to power the continent. I mean, it's a shame that close to half of the continent don't have access to electricity. We need to work on that. So as we sign these trade agreements, we should also put in the investments so that, and I come back to war. Instead of funding war, let's rechannel those resources to development projects, which will unleash opportunities for our people.
It's been a pleasure talking to you. I'm looking forward to the AFCON, and I'm sure South Africa is going to be in the finals with Ghana, and
we will defeat you.
No, absolutely not. Maybe just as a last comment, I think I've always taken pleasure in coming to Raisina, and maybe just your own experience in coming to Raisina. I think you said for the first time.
This is the first time.
I know that Dr. Samir will be very pleased with this. So maybe if you can just your first impressions and maybe word of support from you.
No, I mean, it's a very, very important platform. It's a global public space, and the quality of presentations and the networking. I mean, yesterday I was able to interact with a good number of foreign ministers, great mix from Europe, Asia, the Americas, Africa. And it's such an amazing platform where ideas are incubated and cross-fertilized towards building a future of opportunity, an empowered future that will really lift our people out of poverty to attain their full potential. So Raisina is an incredible platform that the Foreign Ministry of Ghana fully endorses, and will continue to participate, because this is really what is needed to move our world and our continent forward.
Thank you so much. A pleasure meeting you, and good luck with the current administration, and wish you luck, especially for the young people of our continent.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.